Well, hello and welcome again to our day 3 of our Thrive 2020 NoCo virtual summit. And my name is Melissa Kellogg-Lewick, and I am joined today by Allison Profit and Shannon Richardson. They are my co-event directors. And we are also joined by Jana Sanchez and Tina Todd and Kendra Prospero, and we will hear much more about them in just a moment. But I want to just welcome you and thank you for being here today. We're talking all things HR, hiring, PPP compliance, all that great stuff. And I want to first take a moment just to introduce myself and my business. I am a life and business coach for women that are building their businesses. And I've been in business for 15 years and just love helping women take their business from where they are now to where they want to go, showing them all the steps in between. And I also want to thank our presenting sponsor, Weibo, which is the Women Entrepreneur and Business Owners Network. And Weibo is Colorado's fastest growing professional advisory group for women, offering masterminding and thought partnering while building community through the shared experience of being a woman business owner. The organization recently launched here in Northern Colorado, and Allison is our managing director, and Shannon and I are also part of her leadership team. And we are serving the Fort Collins, Loveland, and Greeley and surrounding communities. And we encourage you to visit WeiboNetwork.com to check out their extensive event calendar of networking and learning events. And we are offering a 20% discount on membership now through the end of May. So feel free to check that out. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to Shannon Richardson, and she is going to introduce herself and her business. Shannon?
Thank you, Melissa. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to be able to bring our HR experts to the business owners in our community. I know there's a lot of questions out there. We've had 2 great sessions so far around cash management and sales and marketing, and we're looking forward to another great panel today. So as Melissa said, my name is Shannon Richardson, and my business, I'm a financial advisor with the K&R Group, which is a fiduciary financial planning team under Merrill Lynch. And we work with clients on insurance, investment, and retirement planning. And I think I was thinking about who can we help the most and who can we provide value for? And I always come back to it's folks that are in transition. And I know we're all in transition right now, but I mean things like if someone is needing to buy or sell a business, if there was a loss of a loved one, a parent or a spouse, they've gone through a divorce, they've gone through a job change. A lot of these types of life transitions create a need to have professional guidance around the financial planning. So I just encourage you, if you're going through a transition like that, make sure you find a fiduciary financial planner that can help you navigate that. So with that, I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator today, Miss Allison Profit. She is the owner of Profit Coach, and that's profit with 2 F's. And we just joke that wouldn't like a little bit more profit, right? A little extra profit. So after being in the HR industry for over 15 years, Allison took on a sales position for the first time. And she realized pretty quickly that she had this natural ability to effectively manage a sales process, but not do it in a slimy way. And I think a lot of us worry about that, right? We all are in business. We have products or services that we're selling to the community, and we want to get our messaging across in a genuine way. We don't want to seem like a slimy salesperson. And so that kind of birthed a concept of Profit Coach. And so Allison now is helping her small business clients build, perfect, and manage an effective sales process that leads to long-term profitability and increased profitability for her clients. So not that she has a lot, but in her spare time, Allison enjoys reading. I know she's a avid karaoke singer, and this may or may not be confirmed, but I've heard a rumor that she dances right up until the moment when the Zoom meeting starts. So I don't know if we'll ever know if that's the truth, but I've heard. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Allison Profit, our moderator for the HR panel today.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for that lovely introduction. And I'll neither confirm or deny the Zoom dancing rumor. But if you're lucky enough to be on a Zoom call with me, sometimes I ask people to dance with me. So we won't do that today, though, because we've got lots of things that we want to make sure we cover to provide the value that everybody's looking for in this topic area of HR and managing teams during the COVID-19. So first, allow me to start off by introducing our panelists today. So first, I'd like to introduce Kendra Prospero. She is the CEO and founder of Turning the Corner and is one of the most passionate people around when it comes to work. She's adamant that no one should suffer at work and is not afraid to have difficult conversations around what we all need to do to make work better. She knows firsthand what it's like to be in your shoes, and Kendra's company is one of the few firms in the nation that supports both businesses and job seekers, giving her a unique advantage in today's work environment. What she's found that in terms of the most difficult aspect of running a business during COVID-19 is knowing that you're going to have to make hard decisions around your people. And if you're struggling with how to let people go, managing your new remote workforce, or have concise but hard conversations, Kendra and her company, Turning the Corner, provide really great HR consulting services. And they've been around for 9 years, so they're definitely an expert. So she's looking forward to answering the questions that you have around your employees. Next, I'd like to introduce Tina Todd. Tina is the co-founder of Simply HR, which is an organization that proudly serves Northern Colorado businesses as they're navigating the world of compliance and best practices that come along with having employees. And this ranges from hiring forms, documents, to managing leave requests, terminating employees, and all of the different complexities of HR so that you understand compliance and can focus your time and resources strategically. Tina also, interestingly, co-authored the comic book Define the Line, which is a sexual harassment prevention training that empowers employees to speak up for themselves and each other because everyone deserves a safe and secure workplace. Tina strives to make conversations engaging, meaningful, and fun while addressing the necessary aspects of managing that team. And when she's not in the business community, she is an avid runner, can frequently be found exploring the great outdoors here in Colorado with her family, and has recently embarked on the fun adventures of homeschooling her twin boys. And then lastly, it's my pleasure to introduce Jana Sanchez. Jana specializes in helping people magnify what they're passionate about and connecting them to resources and people. In her work at Trebuchet Group, which is a local consulting firm, she uses her extensive background in organizational management and marketing to help companies get clarity around where they need to go and the confidence to find the right path to get there. She creates and delivers workshops and keynotes on leadership and entrepreneurship and gets delighted when people realize they need more healthy conflict to accomplish great things. I love that. Outside of her work at Trebuchet Group, Jana is also the executive director of Launch NoCo, which is a nonprofit organization helping companies form, grow, and stay in Northern Colorado. I've had the pleasure of partnering with Jana and Launch NoCo. It's a great organization for small businesses. Jana is deeply passionate about growing her community, building long-term sustainable companies, and single malt scotch. So thank you everybody for being here today. The first thing I'd like to ask, I'm gonna throw this question actually over to Kendra. Kendra, what are you seeing in terms of the biggest challenge that employers are coming to you with in terms of pivoting from this, like everything is shut down, to some of the ways that the rules are changing with being able to leave our homes?
Well, thank you, Allison. And let me just also say thank you to Melissa and Shannon for organizing this. So I know this takes a lot of effort, and so great job, ladies, because this is awesome that you've pulled all of us together. So to answer your question, I think the biggest shift I have seen has been the leaders being really surprised at how well it's actually going with working remotely. So I talk with probably about 20 to 40 CEOs on a weekly basis, just through a couple channels that I'm already involved in. And all of them have consistently said, wow, I never thought my teams could be so productive. I didn't think I could be so productive. And then I oftentimes will ask them, well, what do you think you'll do differently once COVID is, we're not through COVID, but things shift once again with COVID and people maybe are headed back to work. And they have all consistently said that they do not think that they will be in the office as often as they were before. And so I think we've all kind of now are going to be embracing this new remote work environment. And I think as HR professionals and whoever is here is on the Zooming with us today, I think it was our opportunity to really think about, all right, what do we need to do with our current infrastructure from a technology perspective, as well as our office space, as well as the way we put our goals out there and how we measure our goals so that we can handle this sort of remote as well as face-to-face environment.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Kendra. I did want to mention to those that are tuning in that this isn't meant to be an interactive experience. So we do want to make sure that you are dropping your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be answering your questions live as they come through. Tina, in terms of the working from home aspect and this remote work, I know Simply HR does a lot of work around compliance and just understanding how to navigate all the laws and regulations around that. What are some of the things from a compliance perspective that employers should be thinking about in terms of managing this remote workforce environment?
Sure, great question. And I feel like we could answer this in a variety of angles. As far as compliance, we want to ensure, the basics. Employees are getting all of the communication and the notices that are necessary to the employees. I think the other thing that is adding some complexity to the workforce right now are all of the laws that have recently come about, such as the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the CARES Act, and all of the intricacies of those. So we want to be really mindful of what our employees are working with in their home lives too. And in order to be fair and compliant to all of the employees, I think it's really important to have individual conversations with all of your employees to better understand what their position is. And we don't want to exclude opportunities for any employees because of possible caretaking responsibilities. So one thing that we're really enjoying seeing is how teams are getting creative in scheduling their employees or allowing employees to set schedules themselves. Some work sharing has become a great opportunity, and all of those pieces working together will certainly help keep the business in compliance. One thing that we are, cautiously recommending businesses avoid is the intent is really positive in that they're trying not to overburden some of their workforce, especially those who do have caretaking responsibilities, but in other ways that could be seen as discriminatory or taking opportunities away from those individuals. So we're definitely walking a fine line right now and managing all of those interactive pieces.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question around the topic of coming back to work and how some of the laws that are out there regarding like the leaves that employers might need to be granting to people. If they maybe don't want to come back or if they have caregiving responsibilities, what does that look like? Is there any protection for those individuals that want to say to their employer, like, I don't want to come back. I don't care if you're creating a work environment where there's social distancing is possible. What are you seeing in there? And what should the folks watching know about?
Sure. So again, so many layers. I'm sort of thinking of this like the Bermuda Triangle. So we have the CARES Act, which is offering really fantastic unemployment benefits right now. We have FFCRA, which is providing workers with caregiving opportunities or an illness themselves, a partial wage replacement. And then of course we have temporary layoffs and furloughs and things like that. So as far as offering opportunities for individuals to come back to work, we're really recommending that they have business relatedness behind who they offer these positions to first. So it shouldn't be based on who they think this is going to be most convenient for. It should be really based on business necessity first. And again, we don't want to discriminate against anyone because of their known family relationships. So perhaps they could offer it broadly to certain individuals within a certain position, and those employees could choose to come back or not. The other consideration, though, is technically the employee should be notifying the state unemployment insurance entity that they have been offered a job back, in which case they may be disqualifying themselves from receiving unemployment. There are a couple of carve-outs though, so they may still qualify based on their individual circumstance, but it really, really is unique to the individual and their circumstances.
Yeah, perfect. I've got a few more questions about that, but I wanna bring Jana into the conversation here, and I'm gonna put a pin in that in my question. So Jana, one of the things I love about your in your bio, you say you wanna help people realize that there needs to be more healthy conflict, and boy, there's such I mean, there's so many differing opinions and there's so much different information out there around just this coronavirus in general and how it's impacting us as individuals. How are you really seeing conflict showing up at work and for business owners right now? Is it different than before? Or are you still seeing the same exact issues? It's just on a bigger scale. Tell us a little bit more.
If you had issues before this, you still have issues. They may in some ways be larger issues now and presenting themselves in different ways. One of the things that we are seeing a huge increase in is the rise of passive aggressive behavior, because people are under a significant amount of stress. And on top of that, they're dealing with shifting expectations and shifting priorities on a regular basis. So if your company has not taken the time to come in and really reset what the expectation is of how we're going to work together right now, first, that's the first piece of it. The second piece around the conflict is really how are we now interacting with each other, because I'm not stopping by your desk to check in on anything on a regular basis anymore. We're not popping by each other in the kitchen, picking up our coffee together and making a quick note here or there. Those are the kinds of interactions that happen on a daily basis that kind of grease the wheels so that when somebody sends a short, terse email and you're not really sure what they meant, if they were really just running low on time or if they really are upset with you, you could do a quick walk by their desk and you knew. That's not happening right now. And on top of all of that, we're piling stress on individuals along with potential caretaking responsibilities and any other number of issues. There's a 2017 American Psychological Institute stress study, there we go, I have a word, that put out the top 3 stressors for people in the United States are the state of the nation, work, and money. That was 3 years ago. Right now, it's really, really increased in a lot of ways. And so what we're seeing is people don't necessarily want to blow up at their coworkers because they recognize everybody's under stress. But the rise of passive aggressive behaviors, the emails that start per my last email, the lack of productivity or the avoidance pieces, those are all increasing significantly.
What tips would you have for the business owners that are on the line in terms of helping their team bust through some of that and creating some of that community and relieving that stress in the team environment?
The first piece of it is just simply to acknowledge that it's happening, right? We often sweep some of this stuff under the rug. It hasn't gotten bad. Nobody's yelling at anybody. I'm going to ignore it and hope it all goes away and it's just been a bad day. And that doesn't actually help solve the underlying problem. And so what we recommend for folks is, one, face it head on and have this conversation, and start with 3 questions with your team, right? What is working well right now? Always start there, because then you know what you don't need to change. What isn't working well yet? What do we need a little bit more extra help with? And then what is missing or unclear? And so how are we communicating with each other? How are we meeting our expectations? How do we all fit into our new, somewhat unusual and shifting priorities so that you can have those conversations? When business owners start with those 3 questions, you really get some good input back as to where you need to go next.
That's perfect. We have so many amazing minds on this panel here. I do want to throw that particular question to both of the other panelists. So Kendra, I would love to hear from you in terms of what it is you would tell the business owners to really help manage and mitigate some of those things that Jenna had spoke to.
Well, I think the interesting part about working more remotely now is we are actually seeing people crave a little bit more of this interaction, even though I think Zoom is a bit exhausting, can be exhausting for folks. We have to kind of remember this age-old study that was done a long time ago now, that showed that only 7% of a message comes across in words alone. 35 or some odd percent like that comes across with the words plus just the voice. And then the other big percentage of the message comes across when you can actually see someone. I think we could modify that study now to actually have like a 4th category of like what you feel and see and sense and hear over just video, because I think it's still not full. There's some almost like physical thing we miss by not being physically together that I think a message is still missed. But because more people are actually using Zoom or using GoTo or all the Google Hangouts, Facebook Messenger, whatever, though I think we're actually seeing that some of that communication is improving a little bit. That's been my experience, because they're not only firing off texts or firing off email only. So if anything, I also am encouraging people to remember that sort of rule of thumb about what's effective with communicating, and to go back and actually say, let's just get over Zoom and let's talk through some of this conflict. And maybe, recognize that we all, as Jana had said, we're all under an enormous amount of stress and pressure, which requires us to be more patient with each other. But then we also can kind of now leverage this technology that helps us improve our overall communication.
Awesome. Tina, I'm going to toss that to you because I'm sure you've got some great insights on that too.
Sure. So from a lot of the workplaces we're seeing, there was a realization, several weeks after our world switched to digital, that all of the interactions between coworkers had become 100% work related. Well, we know that realistically in the former work world, we had that casual banter, we were sharing stories about our weekends and things like that. And I realize people have to be extremely efficient with their time because their responsibilities have oftentimes expanded. But I think it certainly helps to have some sort of platform or space to allow your employees to interact casually. So we've seen some businesses put together something like a virtual water cooler on their Slack channel, or allow for some extra time before or after a scheduled Zoom meeting so that people can just casually converse, and that it doesn't feel like 100% of the time that they're spending with their team is focused on goals and strategy and pivoting and all of these things that we realize are very important. But like we all know, we spend so much time with our work families, oftentimes previously more than we were spending with our actual families. And so we don't want to see those interactions that are fulfilling to employees totally disappear because we've gone digital.
Yeah, I love that. I saw a really funny post the other day. Somebody put up there like, oh, after being quarantined at home with my husband, I realized I actually still really like him and my family because people are so used to spending so much time at work. So, so thank you for that. So what would you say, and I'll allow whoever feels like they may want to take this question, for the business owners that are having difficulty in having people come back to work because there's that additional $600 a week unemployment, what are you telling those business owners to navigate that conversation? Ooh.
Maybe I'll kick it off here.
Yeah, nobody wants to take that one. I mean, the answer is we don't know. It's a hard one.
There are a couple of different types of businesses that are in this situation. Some organizations have changed maybe their product model. So Ryan earlier in the week mentioned an organization who has changed their manufacturing so that they're now manufacturing PPE. It comes as no surprise that demand now for their business is so much higher than they ever anticipated. And so they're actually going to be recruiting and trying to hire new employees, I think. And so they're going to be asking individuals to come into, I don't want to say it's potentially hazardous, because by no means, they're doing all they can to protect the workforce, but it perhaps is more hazardous than sitting on your couch and watching Netflix all day long. So they're going to really have to lean, I think, on their values, benefits, long-term opportunities and perks that come along with joining this organization at this point in time. The other businesses that we really see struggling with this are businesses that had temporarily closed. So their employees are now on unemployment, and now they're looking at reopening in some capacity, and how do they convince their employees to come back to work? Well, first off, again, the employees are disqualified from receiving unemployment if technically they've been offered a position and they have declined suitable work. If there are employees who are saying that they're concerned, then by all means, we recommend having a conversation with the employee. Are there any precautions that you feel like the business can take to help you feel more safe in the workplace, and following through with as much of that as possible within reason, of course. If employees are still voluntarily not coming in, we don't want to be the company to fire someone who's genuinely scared. But maybe the employee is going to voluntarily resign at this point. I think something really important to consider is that this additional $600 per week through the CARES Act does in fact go away July 13th. And Kendra, you might have some different perspective on this, but I would imagine that the employment opportunities that will be remaining will be more scarce than they were prior to this.
Yeah.
So hopefully somebody in the job seeking position is going to realize that and take this opportunity to align themselves with an organization that they're excited about now while they have the chance.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that that's what I was going to say. I don't know quite the same level of detail as you know in terms of the act itself. But I will say that, the message as a leader I would send out to people is, folks, it seems like it's a great idea right now to sit at home watching Netflix and collecting this unemployment check plus the $600 additional, but this will run out. And when it runs out, what is your plan? Because the jobs that are going to be available when this runs out are going to be very scarce, or probably more scarce. And then what are you going to do? And so it's sometimes really hard to get folks to think a little bit more long term, even just a couple of months out. I think especially right now, one day feels like a month, and so getting people to think long term is like a week right now. But we just need to keep reminding people, everyone in our lives, like this advantage we have right now is temporary, and what we are going through is long term. It is not looking like it's going to let up anytime soon. And so as leaders in our communities, we've got to be having those tough discussions with people and being very honest about what approach are you taking. And what I'm seeing is people taking one of three approaches. People are either burying their head in the sand and just saying, like, I'm going to ignore this. This is a media blitz, whatever it might be, whatever their opinion might be, and things are going to go back to normal. Okay, I don't think anyone with thinking far enough in advance is thinking that that's the case at all, but that is certainly an approach. The second approach is that people are saying, okay, what can I do to pivot? Like the manufacturing organization that you just suggested, or you just talked about, Tina, they're pivoting to now be supportive of the folks that are in the hospital, in the healthcare systems, supportive of the organizations that are helping people stay at home. Those are kind of the essential businesses. And then there's other people that are just running to a new future and running to what is going to be reality in a little while. And I think those folks that are legitimately looking at what is going to be happening here in the next 6 months to a year, both as job seekers and as leaders, those are the ones that are going to be okay on the back end of those, in my opinion. And so as leaders in our community, I think we need to be the ones to say, what is your goal and what's serving you and what's going to serve you in 6 months, 9 months, and then make those decisions now that are going to benefit you then.
Yeah, what I think I'm really hearing is like tell the people that the job is available. And it's not just like what you tell them, but then the how you tell them, especially if there's that fear going on there. If they say, no, I can't come back, you have to be able to inform them of what that means for them in terms of, this means that you won't get the unemployment. So I think it's important for the employer to be having that conversation, but just how you're having it, I think, is very important. You don't want to be like, well, you better do it, because if not, you're going to lose the unemployment. I think there's ways that you can navigate that conversation, which you guys have spoke to very beautifully. So a question that came in is, what are some specific ways that managers can make themselves more available in this virtual environment and help employees feel like they're hold on, sorry. What are some specific ways managers can make themselves more available in this virtual environment? So any tips on that? Because again, they can't just do a drive by their office and pop in to visit with their manager the way they used to.
I'll quickly answer, and then Jen, I'm sure you have an addition, both of you do on that. But one thing that we've seen a lot of people doing, and then it's something that's serving them probably to beyond COVID too, is just having more frequent check-ins. Not as long, but more frequent. And actually, we're even doing that at Turning the Corner. We used to meet once a week for our team meeting, and now we're meeting 4 times a week, but just smaller sprints. And it's really nice. And I think we're all going to be glad when we continue this on. It's not just temporary. So that's one thing, is just to have more frequent communication. But then the other thing I think it's important is, and this is a real delicate balance as a manager, you also kind of have to manage how long you talk about COVID. And, it's almost like there's got to be like, okay, we're going to talk about how hard this is, or what we're struggling with, or what we're hearing in the news for just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to move on from it, because there's nothing we can really do about that. We have no control over that, because that's the only thing I'm hearing from some managers, is that they feel like they're spending all their time talking about COVID and stuff that has nothing to do really with business. You've got to give people a place to vent some of that out, but just not for super long. Jen, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, this is the best time for you as a manager to understand how your employees want to be communicated with and how frequently that looks like. So if you haven't checked in with each of your direct reports of what that looks like for them individually, this is the time to do that and to pay attention, because you're going to have people who are external processors who haven't had a chance to really talk through a lot of what they're seeing inside of the business or how things are going. They're maybe trapped with their spouse who doesn't get it, and their kids who don't want to hear it. So they need someone to have that conversation with as an external processor. For those folks who are internal processors, it may be that they prefer to have a quick rundown email every morning of what I'm going to get done, where my roadblocks are, and how you can help support me. Because right now, the best thing that managers can be doing is twofold. And I'll put this in the chat box here in just a second. One is the communication piece. And the Edelman Trust Barometer came out in mid-March. And for those of you who are not familiar, Edelman is the largest PR firm in the world and does a number of surveys and studies on the back end, particularly around trust and brand recognition and some of those things. They dove in to do COVID stuff fairly quickly after it all emerged. And what they found out is that actually CEOs of companies are more trusted for information on COVID than the news media and the president of my country. And they surveyed 10 separate countries. So your CEO position is really important in getting that communication. And so that may be who you designate as your COVID person to be putting out there for information for employees. The second piece of that is that they want to be communicated with more than once a day. And I think the percentage in here is around 75%. So that's in the the box there, and you can all look through that particular PDF about it. But they are wanting to be communicated with more frequently rather than less frequently during this time. And so it really is kind of important for managers to be taking time, probably twice a day at least, to check in with each of their employees and see, where are you at, what got done, how are you feeling, and how can I help you alleviate some of the roadblocks moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. Tina, did you have something to add? I saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, if I could just add briefly. So
Please.
to sort of tag on to something Jana mentioned at the very beginning of this discussion, the importance of having somewhat difficult or maybe uncomfortable conversations. I think we have to realize that a lot of employees are going through financial hardships right now because of maybe family dynamics, or perhaps they're under stress that's creating an unsafe situation. Maybe the interactions they're having with clients over Zoom are not as appropriate as they might have been in person. So I think it's important to not just ask broad questions, how is life going? Because we may not get a real answer, but you may want to ask more specific questions. Have all of your work-related Zoom conversations been appropriate? Is there anything you need from like a support standpoint? Do you need help finding resources on mental health, on food assistance, things like that? And I realize that sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable initially, but I think if we as leaders and CEOs and managers initiate those conversations, then hopefully they will feel less taboo for the employee to bring up later.
I think a good rule of thumb on that is anyone who is making less than $25 an hour on your team is struggling. I promise you they're struggling. They're having a very hard time with this, just making ends meet, the panic around it, getting to and from work, making sure they have the technology, homeschooling, all of those pieces. Everyone is struggling for sure, but you can really, I guarantee anyone who's making less than $25 an hour in the Colorado community is going to be struggling right now. They are in general, and this is just going to be highlighting and making it even worse.
Yeah, it's really interesting. A couple of, 3 weeks into all of this, I actually had the thought of, I should go back into the HR world, because I always took this very heart-centered approach where I did a lot of times what Tina, you were talking about, where you are really asking those questions. And a lot of my HR colleagues would be like, HR isn't social services. Like, that's not your job. You don't need to be doing that. And I always believed that, like, if you're taking care of your employees and making them feel as though they matter as a whole person, that's really important. And then I realized I could better serve the world doing what I'm doing. Dodge that bullet, if you will. Just kidding. But somebody asked a great question. Actually, there's two great questions in the chat that came in. One of them is, and they kind of stack on each other. So one of them is, are there any limitations to what kind of specific questions we can ask, especially around that like more personal stuff? And then the second question that goes along with that is, should the conversations with employees be, this person says like print or voice, or should there be like any printed or email follow-up to make sure that there's sort of that coverage from a clear and legal perspective? I'm going to throw that to you, Tina, first.
Okay. I'll start with the print, email, verbal discussion, I guess. Some of these things the employee may want to keep confidential. So I think going back to our touching base and checking in, are you okay physically, mentally? I think that would be a great just verbal conversation, something that doesn't need to be documented. And in fact, your employee may not want you to document that. As far as when you're offering somebody their position back, you will want to put that in writing, partly because that will help them communicate to the unemployment system exactly when your job has been reenacted, when they will start earning wages, when their wages will be paid out, and things like that. If somebody has said that they have maybe a disability or an underlying condition which is preventing them from returning to a physical workplace, then I would recommend having a documented discussion around that too. We could I'm sure Kendra and I could probably talk for hours about the
Yes.
Americans with Disabilities Act and the interactive process, but we want to make sure that we're showing that we've taken all precautions necessary and that are courteous to our employees, and we want to be taking into consideration their physical concerns. To go along with that, what kinds of questions should we ask or should we not ask? I would keep them sort of I said directed earlier, but also sort of open-ended. We don't want to get into a lot of medical history if they're not willing to share that information with us. Going back to caretaking responsibilities, we may know some things because they've shared things with us, but we may not know that they have an elderly grandparent that they're also taking care of, and they might be 100% capable of fulfilling their entire role with an organization while having a caretaking responsibility. So we don't want to specifically ask, but you could ask something like, you know, are you able to fulfill all of these job functions? And if we're able to work remotely or work a flexible schedule, those are great things you can offer. I would really try to boil things down to what are the essential parts of the job, and really what are the hours required, and then sort of start the conversation there and let it, I guess, be guided a bit by how much the employee is willing and able to share with you at that point.
And I would just add on that it's important to remember that probably the number one thing we can do as leaders, as managers, as HR professionals, the number one thing we can do to help people feel better about their work is to just care for them. Care for them, treat them with care. And I oftentimes recommend that, you know, as a manager, new managers especially struggle with what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate. I don't want to get into trouble. And I would say, you know, I kind of live in the gray of HR, not black and white. So I'm sorry, Tina. I live in the, not that you don't also, but I mean, I know there's definitely some hard, fast rules and stuff, and I tend to be right in the middle of the gray. I would say, you know, treat your employees like you would a neighbor that you like. You're not prying into their lives, but you're treating them with decency and kindness. You're asking them how they are. How is life? You heard about somebody, you know, last weekend doing something in their family. You can ask those questions. You don't want to be like loaning them money. You know, you're not going to go to that far, but you can care for them. Just care for them, and they're going to then feel like they matter to the organization. They matter to you, and they're going to feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more likely to give it their all and be more engaged. And so, and yes, there are definitely some trickier areas. Don't pry. Don't be that, you know, nosy neighbor, boss, but, you know, definitely care for them.
Yeah, one of the things I always would say whenever a manager would come to me about concerns about, like, should I say this, should I not say this? Like, I don't want to peel back the, you know, the covers on this topic or that topic. I always took the position, probably similar to you, Kendra, of like that gray area is that if you can demonstrate the intent behind whatever it is that you are doing as the employer, right? Like, because I think I've been involved in legal cases where somebody was trying to say like, well, they were discriminatory in what they were doing. And it's like, well, no, like you openly shared. So, you know, we were trying to help and support you. And so it is a gray area. It's tricky. And it makes sense that people are afraid to go down that path because they don't want to be the one that has that lawsuit that they have to like go and defend. Jenna, do you have anything to tack on to that particular, those particular questions?
I think that there is an interesting thing for both managers and owners to kind of navigate here. We are in an incredibly difficult situation in a lot of ways. Yes, you need to open your business back up so you have a business. And yes, you want to be able to care for your employees and understand their fears. And it's walking the line that comes down the middle between calculation and compassion. And if you are able to navigate between both of those things with the understanding that you will never be able to haul all the way to one side or the other, but actually have to figure out how you thread through both of those pieces of, yes, the calculation of we actually still have to have a business so employees can get paid. And on the other side of that, I want to take very, very good care of my employees. So sometimes it's really just as simple as looking the person in the face as you can over Zoom and say, hey, This is what I'm trying to navigate. Help me do that. And when you bring the employee into helping navigate some of those situations, you sometimes come to a faster resolution.
Yeah, it's like the help me help you from a place of like love and compassion and really caring about the business and caring about the individual and caring about who it is that your business might serve. I think that's really great, Jenna. Thank you for that. There's a question that came in regards to the Families First Act, which I'm not super familiar with all the rules and regulations. I don't work in the HR space. But the question is, was there a form released to request a waiver for businesses with 50 or less employees to be exempt from that particular act? Families First. She said she thinks it's called Families First. I'm not familiar with the name of it, so.
Yeah, good question. So the form that was released in conjunction with Families First Coronavirus Response Act, FFCRA, was the model notice poster. So it's available from the Department of Labor, and that one really is a poster to just notify employees of their rights under FFCRA or Families First. It's been told that we could post that in the physical work location and also distribute it electronically, considering everybody has been remote. As far as the exemption, so it's important to note that the exemption only applies to a portion of FFCRA. So I'll try to summarize this briefly, but FFCRA provides emergency paid sick leave to employees when they have certain circumstances, such as they're seeking a medical diagnosis for COVID, they are sick or have been mandated to quarantine. For example, we had a business here who has an employee in the halfway house. They had a positive case there, so the whole house had to go under a mandatory quarantine, which was orders from a local government entity. So paid emergency sick leave in those situations. And it's also paid emergency sick leave for 2 weeks for someone who has a child home, 14 or under, or 18 or under if there's a physical or mental disability. And again, that's 2 weeks. And there's a calculation, so feel free to reach out to me if you want to dive more into that. So that's the first half of the act, and nobody is exempt from that. The second half of the act expands the existing Family Medical Leave Act. And so the expansion of FMLA is providing additional paid time off to individuals who have a child home because the school is closed or the child care facility is closed. The only exemption that is allowable for businesses with 50 or fewer employees is that second portion of the leave. So the caretaking responsibility for a child, if the school is closed, may be something that a business could be exempt from. There's no, I shouldn't say that definitively. I don't believe there's an official document from the IRS. I would have to double check that, but it's basically could be considered an exemption if the leave would create a financial hardship. Obviously all of this is, so there's some way to define it, I'm sure. And also if the absence of that particular employee poses a significant risk to the operations, which is really fascinating, I think. So yeah, it really gets into some IRS guidance. So it's been interesting to see how the IRS and the Department of Labor and Equal Employment Opportunity Commission are all having to play together in these spaces. And so it's getting a little dicey where to get the guidance from on each particular act. But I can follow up with somebody individually if they have a specific question about it.
It's always fun when you watch multiple government agencies try to interact and play nice with each other.
Yeah. They're not as good at that as HR people are.
As I was seeing all this stuff come out, I was like, you know what? No, pretty sure I don't want to go back into that space. So I'm so glad that you guys are knowledgeable and you're here providing these answers to people. One of the questions that came in are, what are some of the tools that you're all using in your businesses to foster connection and communication? I know it's sort of like that keeps being a topic that comes up, but people are really curious. They're wanting to find out what are successful businesses doing, and how are they doing it? I think it's like the how. It's like, okay, we need to talk more. Well, what are we doing to talk more? Is it just Zoom? We're so tired of Zoom. What are some of the other tools that you guys are using or seeing businesses use?
I don't know if I'd call it specifically a tool in terms of communication outside of Zoom. Slack is always a fun thing for many a company. But for us, particularly at Trebuchet and for the clients that we work with, we are in the process of developing a 90 to 120 day strategic initiative plan, right? So when COVID hit, everybody's strategic plans just kind of went out the window. And we have no idea what market conditions will look like moving forward. And so your strategic plan that you built based on a rough idea of what market conditions were going to be 6 months ago is now a document you're going to want to stick on a shelf because it's no longer relevant. And so we're bringing employees together with their leadership teams and starting to get input on what are the most important things that the frontline folks have been seeing that we can pivot or work with to create a short-term strategic plan. Patrick Lencioni, the grandfather of organizational health, refers to it as a rallying cry in some ways. And this is a perfect opportunity to really engage employees in that conversation around how are we going to move forward and what does my specific role look like in helping the organization achieve its goals.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we are also, I don't know if it's so much a tool, but I think having clear goals and managing to those goals are going to be super important with a remote workforce. And so whatever tool you're using, like, there's EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, that's sort of introduced in the book Traction. That's become very popular here in Colorado. It's a good model for setting goals, as Janet was just saying. And then there's also I don't know how many of you have been in a software engineering environment, but Agile is a tool that software engineers have been using for a while for developing software. There is absolutely no reason why the infrastructure of Agile can't be used in goal setting and getting things done. And so just researching Agile a little bit and seeing how developers are using it, there's some things that would be completely irrelevant for like a marketing team or an HR team. But the idea of just having these frequent communications that are called sprints, setting up short-term goals and sprinting through them to get to a bigger goal, I think are going to be really popular going forward. And then I think tools like Asana, if anyone's heard of Asana, that's a project management kind of team tool. There's also, oh my goodness, it just left me. So there's the like Agile Zen, which is a little bit more like a Kanban board type thing of communicating and moving tasks around. Trello is the one I was trying to think of. Trello is a great way of kind of getting to-dos out, moving them around with the team, but you're going to need some kind of technology for keeping track of things that need to get done and having people to be able to log into it. So if you don't have anything like that, all those tools are extremely affordable. Agile Zen is almost free for a certain number of people. Trello is pretty much free. So you're going to need something like that, though, I think, to manage the remote environment.
And Kendra, you mentioned Traction. The other one I want to mention, which I actually think is perhaps more helpful for certain kinds of businesses, is The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack, which is an open book management process. So whether or not you choose to open your books, and honestly, this may be the time if you're going to do it, to really get your employees engaged in how the business is working and where they fit into it, this might really be that time. But inside of that, it also talks a little bit about how do you define and look at what key metrics are that your employees actually have levers to pull on inside of the business so they know what they can be doing to increase profit lines or customer retention or marketing pieces in those kinds of ways. So if you're really looking for how do we set up metrics for each area of the business that then align to larger goals, that would be the place I'd go.
Perfect. I have dropped some of those into the chat box, so hopefully I captured all those effectively. And we'll do our best to maybe grab some links for some of those tools and gather some of that information from the panelists so that we can put that into our Facebook group. So we still have a little bit of time. We've got a few more questions here in the box. I do want to remind you that we will be posting the recording for the video in the Summit private Facebook group. So if you haven't joined that already, we'll make sure that we drop a link for the Facebook group into the chat box so that you can be sure to join that. Somebody has a question in terms of insurance. Are there any business type insurance policies that they should consider adding? I'm not sure if this is a, more of the financial panel that this question would have been best answered by, but I'm sure there are some policies that may be coming up that you guys are seeing from the HR side, whether it be some disability policies or different insurances that you think small business owners should be looking at in terms of navigating this, supporting their employees. Tina, I'm gonna look at you because I just feel like you're the operations and tactical compliance side of things.
Honestly, I can't imagine insurance needs will change a lot. We've heard some organizations lowering certain levels of insurance. For example, a moving company may not be doing as much work now, so they can be finding a huge cost savings and lowering some of their insurance. One concern I have, and hopefully it won't hit the small business world as much, but many of you may have heard that Walmart has, there's a lawsuit against Walmart now for the death of an employee. His family brought the lawsuit forward, and they're claiming that Walmart didn't do enough to provide PPE and listen to employees' concerns, and that eventually led to the death of their family member. So I certainly hope that doesn't hit the small business community, and I'm sure that all of you listening are doing everything you can to listen to your employees and follow precautions outlined by CDC and the counties. However, I guess that could be a concern, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know about insurance, no so much, but there's some neat things that I'm seeing come out of this that I think could really benefit people on the back end that companies should just be a little bit aware of. But under the CARES Act, there was the ability to transfer what was being put toward a 401k. The matching funds for a 401k can now go towards student debt. And it's tax-free. So there's a tax implication for the company. Apparently it's supposed to expire, I think, at the end of the year, but I think that is such a cool benefit that I can't imagine why companies wouldn't clamor and be demanding that stay on. So I think we'll see some other really, fun, or not fun, but helpful and appropriate for the various generations and where each person is in their life. I shouldn't even say generations, just where we are, like when we're in our 20s, what we're worried about, when we're in our 30s and 40s, what we're worried about, when we're in our 50s and 60s. I don't care what generation you're in. It just has to do with your age. But anyway, so I don't want to label it because I hate that so much. But I think there's gonna be some really cool benefits that may come out of this. And I think the business community could be the ones that are really driving, like, this is what I think our teams need, and let's go make this happen. But that's not only the insurance question. So sorry, Allison, I got us a little off there. But
no, that's okay. I love that you're like, well, maybe it's not fun, but like, to HR people, it's probably fun. Perfect. There's a question that came in regards to if an employer has to lay off employees, or if they've done that already, but they know they want to bring them back. The question is that the same as being furloughed? And what are ways that they can stay in contact with those individuals? Is there any legal restrictions around anything like that? I'm gonna throw that probably to Tina again, because it seems like it's like a legal type question.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I have to admit, I was trying to follow along on the question in the Q&A,
Yeah.
and somehow I missed it.
Oh, it's not in the Q&A. It's another question that we have. So, so if an employer has to lay people off, or if they have, and they know they're going to want to bring them back, they wanted to know, is that the same as being furloughed? Because I think sometimes there's terms that are thrown around and people are like, what's the difference between a furlough and a layoff? And then are they allowed to stay in contact with those individuals if they're sure they're wanting to bring them back?
Okay, yeah, great question. So as far as the terminology, A temporary layoff and a furlough are sort of synonymous in that they are a short-term situation. They can also work in conjunction with what's called job attached on the unemployment application. So in Colorado, job attached implies that you'll have work with the organization that you're being temporarily laid off from within the 16-week time period. So the employees are anticipating going back to work within that time period. And then, I'm sorry, Allison, I'm totally spacing the second.
Yeah, is it okay for them to stay in touch?
yeah.
Like, is there any legal,
Yeah.
ways they're supposed to do it or anything like that?
Good question. So yeah, I would communicate very clearly through perhaps an email blast to all of the employees on maybe a weekly basis at the most, to just give them an update as to your best guess on when you'll be reopening, what factors you're considering and assessing. For example, some organizations aren't able to offer services until they have certain forms of PPE because that has been required by their overseeing entity like DORA or something like that. So, being really transparent. This is when we anticipate having the PPE. This is when we anticipate bringing you back. I certainly wouldn't ask the employees to do any work because then they would be not laid off. Or there might be a situation where a workplace needs a small amount of work to be conducted after they have temporarily laid off their employees. In that situation, I would go back to that business relatedness. Who are maybe the most tenured employees that are going to be able to add the most value at this interim period of time? Or, who has the most cross training, whatever the case is, and perhaps offering that person a partial position so that they are still collecting some employment assistance or wage replacement assistance from unemployment, and they are still collecting some wages from the business. I wouldn't be in touch any more than weekly, and in some situations, maybe it's appropriate to spread it out to every 2 weeks or something.
Perfect. Yeah, I think there's no such thing. I mean, there's no such thing as over communicating. So I know you said weekly, but I don't think that there'll be anything wrong with, like, if it is more than, right, if you get an update, because we're all hearing updates all the time. And so when there's an update coming in from the external sources, nobody knows what's real, what's true. Who do we listen to? Is it going to change tomorrow? So how much time do I spend really understanding the thing that came out today? So I think that it's just important to know it's like communication is just so important right now. And we are still taking questions. So please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A box. And we'll be sure to get those answered live. So with regards to businesses opening back up, where can a business owner go to find like the greatest source of truth on what it is, what guidelines they need to reopen? I know you mentioned DORA, but there's so much out there. So what are you seeing as a great resource for employers to access for that?
Your common sense.
Common sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first question is, is it going to benefit our company from a revenue perspective by bringing everyone back? That's the first question. And if the answer is, then don't bring them back. It's not worth the risk. Until there are 3 things in place where we have testing and we know who is sick and who isn't. There's the contact tracing where we can then get in touch with people who've potentially been infected. And then there's some sort of medicine, either in the form of a vaccine or in the form of medicine that slows down or makes the disease not so bad. Why would you bring people together? And why would you put everyone at risk, especially if it's not going to benefit your company? So right now there isn't any clear, I mean, I'm a news junkie. I read 4 newspapers on a daily basis because I'm just who I am. I love that stuff. And they're from all different spectrums. They're from all different perspectives because I want to have a balanced view. And there is no specific place that's giving good guidelines right now, Allison, honestly. Every government entity every city And every state and federally, everyone has a bit different perspective. So I think you need to use your common sense. You're a leader. This is time to lead and put that thinking cap on what is going to be the best thing for my people.
Perfect. Great. Jenna, I saw you kind of like perk up a little bit when Kendra started talking so passionately. I'm going to toss that over to you, get your perspective on that.
I think I'm going to send this one to Tina because anything I have to say has nothing to do with a legal perspective whatsoever.
Just a reminder, I'm an HR professional. I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you legal advice. I do think that if you really want those tangible resources, you should be looking at the Larimer County website. They do have some guidance for employers. Also, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has some general precautions that businesses can implement. And lastly, one that has really sort of been highlighted recently is the EEOC, so the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So in the normal work world, we don't conduct medical assessments on our employees because most of us are probably not medical professionals. However, it has been deemed in this situation appropriate, debatable, to do things like temperature checks on your employees and things like that. So the EEOC has given really specific guidelines as to how to properly conduct assessments like that. If perhaps you are truly an essential workplace, workers have to come in if they're working in close proximity to each other. It might be something you want to implement. For additional guidance on how to do that, I would look at the EEOC.
That's great. I think that really is what the question was wondering is where are those resources at? However, I think it's a really interesting thing that you bring up, Jenna, is that there is the rules and how we're supposed to be, and then there is our own personal things. And I think this could be a really interesting point of discussion for the next few moments. How can people kind of manage that personal thing that they're having and experiencing and their firm opinions about whatever it is, like common sense is different for every person, and being an effective leader? Jenna, I'm gonna give that to you first.
There's a lot of answers to that question, and some of them aren't printable, but in the larger scope, I think it boils down to what is the cascade of needs. And when I talk about the cascade of needs, what I mean is the business needs live up here, right? Because that's the thing that allows us to actually all be here and work together and get paid. The employee needs live here in the middle. Those are the next thing, right? And then the bottom of the cascade of needs is what do I need as an individual? And when you think of it that way, what is it that the business actually needs? And I think we have to look at a couple of things in the larger scope of what does a business need. Because right now, a lot of folks are focused on the financial piece, which makes absolute sense, totally does. And they're focused on how do I help my employees? That's important. But how you handle reopening your business right now and what you are doing will leave a distinct impression with every customer you have. And I don't know if you've all looked lately in the news, but I have a distinct opinion about Shake Shack right now and what they've done with the PPP money and some of those other things. So people are paying attention to those things. And so it's not just about a financial decision and it's not just about your employees. It's also about how is the larger community in which you function and your customers going to feel about the decisions that you are making and the precautions that you are taking.
I think we can all just give her a round of applause. Drop the mic. Go ahead, drop it. Let's see you drop the mic, Jana. That was great.
Yeah. And I think that's a piece that gets lost sometimes in the semi-panic of what is the economy doing and how is it doing it. But we also have to come back to what does consumer and customer sentiment look like and what do you want them to remember about you
Yeah.
Because if you are looking to expand your business at some point, that is an entire pool of potential job applicants. And I swear for the next couple of years, every company I do business with in some capacity or another, I'm going to look at how did they handle COVID with their employees and their customers. And if it wasn't good, there are other companies out there that can get my business.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, you even think about any other time there's like been, like crises in our country, like 9/11, right? Like people looked at like how those companies, and those are big, a lot of those were bigger companies that we were really kind of putting under the microscope. But I think that's so true. We will be paying attention to where we put our dollars. Um, Kendra or Tina, do either of you have anything to kind of tack on there in terms of how can leaders manage their own personal opinions and passions and biases and bringing that into just navigating all of this? Do they put it on a shelf? Do they put it out there? Kendra.
Well, I think empathy is always just a great place to be coming from with in any leadership role. And to be empathetic means listening well. And so listening to your people on what they're worried about, what they're struggling with, what's scary for them, and then just being empathetic for that situation. And trying to hold your own opinion around it. I mean, they're going through something legitimate. For them, that is their world. And you're not going to necessarily change that perspective. So just being empathetic and trying to care for them again, as I said earlier. I love what you said, Jana. I mean, I'm going to bring that up to my CEO communities. How do you want to be remembered through this? I think that's a great question.
It's a huge one right now, and
Yeah.
it is one of the few things we actually have full control over.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I love that. So thank you for that.
Beautiful. Tina.
While it is true that I'm a little bit of a black and white compliance junkie and I'm a bit of a rule follower, I promise I am also a real person.
Of course you are.
Anybody who spent 15 minutes with you, Tina, knows that.
I also hugely believe in leading with empathy. And in deciding how to manage your team, the realistic picture is that staying closed might and likely is the most beneficial thing for your employees from a financial and safety perspective. And so I wouldn't discount staying closed because we're so eager to serve our customers, and although that's fantastic, we also have to serve our employees, and realistically they're making decent, hopefully, money on unemployment right now. And we've talked to organizations, just for example, to throw out some industries, a childcare facility or a gym, like if they were allowed, or if they open like they're allowed to do, is anyone realistically going to use their services? And then is that just going to sort of ping pong their employees a little bit more, which is totally unnecessary until the environment feels more stable and we can move forward with a more solid plan and bring our employees along for something that feels more solidified and safe versus just guessing and trying to pivot weekly.
Yeah. Perfect. And Tina, I agree. Anybody that has ever had any conversation with you knows that you are a human being. So, and those of you that are tuning in, all HR people are humans. Even if it might seem like they aren't, they are. They want to do the best for you. We had a great question come in around so a business that uses independent contractors, and they want to see if they can defer their payments until a later date. So I guess what they're doing is they said we're crossing fingers but not relying on round 2 of PPP. I have independent contractors. If they can afford it, is it okay to ask them if we can just defer their payments until a later date? Tina, I'm going to throw that over to you because that seems like a compliance question to me.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the state says that for employees, we have to pay our employees at least once per month. For independent contractors, hopefully you have some sort of contractual agreement that outlines and specifies the frequency of their payment. If you do have something like that, you could consider revisiting that and revising it with your independent contractors and consenting and updating the terms of that agreement. And there is no requirement to pay independent contractors on a certain frequency, so you can certainly do that.
Perfect, great. And that same person had another question. So it's not really a question. I think it's a little bit more maybe like where could these people find the guidelines? So a big customer base of ours is K through 12 kiddos. We can reopen for private personal training in terms of aerial instruction and circus fitness. That sounds like a cool business. We have our reopening risk management and procedures ready in phases. We are okay with the adults, but don't have clear guidelines about what to do with kiddos, except what schools or daycares are allowed to do. Tina, what would you provide from a guideline perspective? Like, where can these folks maybe go in terms of finding out what those regulations are? I know we have opinions that we just shared about have common sense, and so, but from a tactical perspective, where can these people go to get guidelines for running those businesses in the reopening stages?
That's a great question, and I can't say I have a specific answer. To my understanding, the services we're providing to kids is allowable to the same extent as we're providing services to adults. My personal thoughts around that, being a parent and having lots of parent friends, I do think parents are going to hesitate to send their kids to extracurricular type services. So I wouldn't really bank on if you build it, they will come. I don't know if that's going to be the case this summer for summer camps and all activities.
The first place I would look would be with the Larimer County Health District, and getting on a phone call with them, because they're going to have the clearest set of guidelines and will know where you need to look for that.
Yeah, and this isn't really on the HR side of it or giving any recommendations on where to go in terms of opening, but my recommendation would really be find ways that you can operate and offer services in a distance way, right? Are there ways that you can take your classes online? What can you do to really, we use the word pivot all the time right now, but what can you do to really kind of pivot to be able to, because it sounds like you have a really fun, for that person that asked the question, it sounds like you have a really fun, great business, and it could be a great thing to help people get out and move their body and give something to help kiddos burn their energy off. But I think that there's going to be a lot of people that are maybe not going to want to be bringing people in to a physical space where they may have that exposure. So the person says, we're online already, kids and parents need something else for their kids. So that's very true. So I think keep in mind what Jenna said in terms of how do you want to be remembered, in terms of how you handled this situation. I think the answer is there's not a good answer to some of these things. It's we're all navigating for the first time, so there's no rule book we've been handed. So that's great. So we are going to be heading into our wrap up here, and I'd like to ask each of you, we're just going to go a little round table here and ask everybody to share just a final closing thought on anything that you would like to share with business owners who have some HR questions, and anything that you'd like to offer as like a tip or giveaway to them, which we'll be sending out. So Jen, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What are your wrap-up comments?
More than anything right now, in terms of team health and dealing with your employees, transparency and communication are the most important things you can do. And if you feel like you're over communicating, you're probably communicating enough. And so I would leave those lines of communication open. Be really, really transparent about what factors you're using in your decision making, where the company is and what it needs to be doing next, and really take this time to figure out if you have the ability to mine your employees for their ideas and perspectives, because they've been sitting around in their houses too. They've got ideas. It's time to incorporate those back into the business for the benefit of the business. We do have at Trebuchet Group, we do have some free calls, particularly for folks who are looking at creating short-term strategic plans for the next 90 to 120 days, or how you are wanting to prep for difficult conversations. I'm happy to have a half hour to an hour phone call, Zoom call with anybody who's looking for help in that, guys.
Thanks, Jana. And Tina.
I guess just some closing thoughts. Going back to the theme I think that we've had all morning is leading with heart and empathy. I believe that's absolutely the best way to manage your team, your business, and your customers. I would also just be cautious if you have employees who are coming forward with needs for scheduling or time off because of maybe a disability, illness, or child care responsibilities. There may be some implications and necessities for you as a business owner to follow through with. So if that's the case, please feel free to reach out to me. There are lots of resources, and I am going to put in the chat my business information. We do have a web page right now dedicated to COVID-19 where we've put together short video snippets to try to explain some of the complexities in these laws. And we're also offering HR 360 as a platform at no cost to anyone who's interested in having some HR resources available. And I'm also happy to take calls initially complimentary to some businesses who need some extra help.
Perfect. Thank you, Tina. And Kendra.
I think my final thought is that, you know, all of you are experts in what you do. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be an expert in how you navigate all this. And so don't feel like you're alone right now. I mean, here are 3 people who are all resources for you, 4 with Allison as well. And so we're really here to help you navigate it. And, you know, right now, I mean, we are just giving away time right and left. Like nothing, we're just here to serve and to support. And so please do not feel like you can't reach out to us. I mean, we are, all 3 of us, you know, my team at Turning the Corner, like we are here. And then I would just add on one more thing is that, you know, as you're finding and interacting with individuals who are now really without a job and without, you know, the unemployment insurance, and, you know, as we get further and further in this, you know, another thing we're offering is a Turning the Corner is services for job seekers to help them. So, you know, go to our website, turningthecornerllc.com. We're getting ready to release a boot camp that would hopefully be really helpful for people, you know, navigating a job search through COVID. But please reach out if you need anything. I mean, it's on the house right now. So we're just here to serve.
That's amazing. Well, so I did take a couple of notes as we were going through, and ladies, you summed it up so beautifully, but, you know, definitely empathetic communication. I loved the thing that Jenna shared about managing the line between calculation and compassion. I really, really loved that. And in your conversations, like, you want to be acknowledging what people are going through and give them a space to clear, but let's not be spending all of our conversations talking about COVID-19 and how hard it is. I think we need to, we're in this and we're going to be in it for a while. So it's time to create our go forward paths. We had some really great information from all 3 of you, but Tina, I definitely want to highlight, like, you were so valuable in the kind of tactical and compliance related things, talking about the FFCRA. I think that there was some really helpful information about the unemployment and that kind of going away on July 13th. So we'll be adding some of these into the show notes when we upload the recording in the Facebook group. And thinking about, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered in terms of how you led your organization, your employees, and served your customers during this time? So thank you everybody so very much for your time today. This was really great. It's fun to play in the sandbox of HR. It's been a while for me. Tomorrow, we have another session for the Thrive 2020 NoCo Virtual Summit. We'd like to invite all of you to be sure to attend that. The session tomorrow is Planning for the After, Business Continuity and Operations Strategy. Having strong yet compassionate leadership, a solid plan for maintaining business operations and continuity will help businesses stay in business, retain employees, and better thrive through this crisis. Our panelists are experts in guiding leaders to be the visionaries that their companies need right now. Remember to visit the Facebook group for any more Q&A that we didn't maybe touch on during today's session and further discussion. And the webinar recording will be available in the Facebook group within 24 hours. I want to thank you all again for your time, and we hope that you continue to thrive through the sessions and through the end of this entire pandemic situation that we all find ourselves in. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Be well.
Bye.